Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Kevin Richardson. He is completely turning the wildlife industry on its head, changing the rules about how we relate to wildlife, particularly wildlife in captivity. He is the author, along with Tony Park, of a wonderful book you should all read called Part of the Pride, My Life Among the Big Cats of Africa. He has a wonderfully classy wife named Mandy who does the PR and marketing for him, who's awesome with people. And frankly, he has shown that we have to be rethinking our relationship not only to conservation, but to nature, to wildlife. He's also the producer, presenter, and the animal behaviorist of a brand new film called White Lion, Home is a Journey. He has produced other documentaries. One is called Dangerous Companions, and the other one is called In Search of a Legend about black leopards. He has so much to teach us. Welcome, Kevin Richardson, to It's Rainmaking Time. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm really honored to have you on the show, Kevin. And there's so much that you communicated in your book, Part of the Pride. I read it twice, actually. I think the first thing that was very profound about the book, and I really want to talk about the book because I know it came out in 2009. I want to really start with that if we can. You make a lot of these distinctions about hunting, about farming, about how we treat and take care of wild animals in captivity. And you also make some distinctions in the book about just because they're in captivity doesn't mean we get to treat them poorly. You have a paradigm about this that's as serious and as rigorous as Muhammad Yunus's of the Grameen Bank when he said to the banking industry and to humanity, we don't have to use collateral to issue loans. What you're doing in your body of work is really turning the tables on perceptions of animals who are in captivity. Talk about that.
It all started pretty much a long time ago. I had the same kind of thinking as most people before I met my first two lions, but having got to meet these creatures and realize that there's more to a lion than just these big cats that everyone perceives to be ferocious, man-eating predators, and that these two lion cubs that were actually brothers were so different and had such different personalities. It got me really thinking about the kind of lives that animals do lead in captivity. And I'm not just talking about lions, it's all animals, in fact. I mean, we can take what I say about things in the book and bring it to the home and the way some people can even treat their domestic animals. But specifically for lions, I thought there's got to be a different way to get down and work with them to make their lives happy in captivity. And then I decided, and it wasn't a conscious decision, it just so happened, but the way it so happened is that I formed extremely close relationships with the animals and became part of their family. And by doing so, it made their lives a lot easier and it made my life a lot easier working with them in captivity, because having an animal in captivity that just wants to eat you or is terrified when you come near it, it doesn't make a happy situation for you or for the animal. So that was the thinking.
And I also noticed in the book that you've had a lot of these challenges with the people that are looking from the outside in at you and what you're doing, not really getting it, kind of distorting what it is that you're really doing, but not understanding that you're making connections with these animals. You have relationships with them. They're not just pets or employees of yours. And I love that.
That is so true. And if you look at my run, when I was 2 years in, I didn't really have a platform to stand on and preach about it because people would sit there and go, well, what do you know? You're going to get eaten in another year anyway. And you knew it this. So, convention overrules you, so to speak. And just to go on about that, I met a guy the other day who really actually summed up what I was trying to get at in the book. He said, Kevin, I really got what your book was about, the underlying message. And for him, it was, I talk a lot about relationships, and that is what I pride myself on, is the fact that I actually do have relationships with these animals. It's not some crazy man going into the lion's den and trying to tame the wild beast. I don't proclaim to do that. What he was saying to me is that everyone could go away from reading this book and say, well, what is your lion, in life? And I found that quite interesting.
That's a great question. That's a perceptive person.
Yeah, he was.
I noticed that you go kind of back and forth into the spirituality of this. And on one hand, you say, I'm not into spiritual mumbo jumbo. But on the other hand, these animals have an energy about them. They have an aura about them that's real.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think you could do what you were doing if that wasn't so. Do you?
people refer to me as the lion whisperer. And that's just a label that I've gotten over the years due to a newspaper article that did the rounds. And the more I tried to back away from that, the more people called me it. So ultimately, somebody sat me down one day and said, listen, instead of trying to get rid of this name attached, why don't you just use it in a positive way and in a positive light? But on the lion whispering and on the spirituality side of it, people were starting to say, well, if you've got this ability, got this wild pride of lions in their reserve, can you come and talk to them and figure out what's going on with them? So from that perspective, no. But when you enter into the presence of being with a lion, you do realize that each individual has this energy about them. And that, yes, for sure, there is that aura that you've got to deal with. And the sixth sense of being with them and just knowing, people say, well, how do you know that the lion is not going to just turn on you? And it's a really hard question to answer because you just do. It's just that connection.
I also thought it was really classy of you in the book to honor Steve Irwin and to share that he's somebody that put his money where his mouth is and stood in his vision, but also financed that vision. I think Steve Irwin kind of paved the way for people to be able to receive you, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, if there's one guy who I would like to follow in his footsteps, it is Steve Irwin, because he had the same kind of criticism that I'd face on a day-to-day basis, is that people were like, oh, yeah, well, the crocodiles are going to get him. And I think maybe there was an element of that's why a lot of people followed, just to see if that did happen one day. But, what I really admired is he was a guy who came from that background. I mean, his heart and soul was really in it. And the stardom came as a result of that, but he never lost focus of where his roots really were, and that was funding conservation and getting really behind it. Whereas there's a lot of personalities out there that are really good and well liked, but if you actually go deeper down, it's from one project to the next, and each project is just treated like a different venture. What I really liked about Steve was, it's similar to me, is that it started from his passion and his love of what he does.
It's really noticeable when people are doing something from their heart versus when they're just doing it for the money or for the commercial opportunity of it. You wrote a bit about the lion farms that you were taken into and revealed what happens there. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that and educate the public. I know you did write extensively about it in your book, but it was interesting to note that when you tried to do something about these lion farms, that industries all of a sudden went under threat. And I wonder if you could share something contextually about that with the audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's such a controversial topic, especially in South Africa, this whole issue of farming lions actually to be hunted. And the serious problem that I have and had is when lion cubs are utilized as kind of like a petting object, and people can go and form close bonds and relationships with them. And then those same animals, when they mature and they become a little bit dangerous for people to interact with, end up becoming trophies. And this is what was happening. I mean, there's ethical and unethical business in any industry. I mean, that happens, we know, the world throughout. But especially when it comes to the industry pertaining to lions, it just seems money is the overwhelming factor here, and greed. So although I do say in my book, I understand from the perspective where a lot of these third-generation farmers are coming from, I feel that the conservation authorities in our country aren't doing enough in terms of saying we're going to blanketly ban this captive breeding of lions for hunting altogether, because quite frankly at the moment they're just pussyfooting around it. And basically legislation that is soon to be implemented, if all things go according to plan, is really to the lion's detriment. I mean, they're just drawing out the process of an industry that will still happen. So although I'm not against hunting per se, if done really correctly, and to go into it in saying that people would feel very differently about people farming, say for instance, our local antelope called the blesbok, no one would even give it two thoughts if those animals were shot for trophy, but because it's a lion, it does hold a different status and people start to get more emotionally attached. The big issue I mention in the book is the practice of almost raising lions as your pets and then kind of selling them off to the trade of hunting because you can get some good money for them.